So I'm kind of interested in rambling as a possible, important social technology for these times we're in, because perhaps through the ramble we might learn a lot more about ourselves and each other by allowing this more freeform, flowing conversation to happen. I also think there is something quite helpful, generative perhaps, in the practice of rambling. Could rambling be a kind of social technology for these times?
You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast with me, Dan Burgess. The story of Spaceship Earth is simple. We live on a life-giving rock called Earth, hurtling through space. Like a spaceship, we have a finite amount of supplies with an intelligent operating system called nature, which keeps everything replenished as long as we all respect it and participate wisely. So a deep relationship with this mysterious system, along with spontaneous cooperation between humans and all life, is essential to keep us thriving and the spaceship flying. In this podcast, I'm in conversation with folk involved in regenerating life, shifting consciousness and reimagining how we can live more beautifully and peacefully. I talk with artists, writers, activists, designers, adventurers, healers, farmers, creative mavericks, and more. Their stories invite us to participate in the co-creation of life-sustaining cultures, in service to life, becoming crew on Spaceship Earth.
Greetings, Earthling. Welcome to the Spaceship Earth podcast. This is Dan. It's been a little while. Thanks for tuning in. This is it's my first episode of 2026. I did the reissue of Chris Hines, but this is the first episode as such, and this is a little experiment which I'm intending on doing once a month. If you've been listening to the podcast for years, I'm not sure who is still listening to it, who has been listening to it for years, but if that's you, you may remember a few episodes I used to record called Rambling in the Woods. They were literally me rambling in the woods, and it was a place for me to just sit in the woods, probably my most preferred place to be on the spaceship, and a chance for me to reflect in my rambling ways on what is alive for me. And the thing with rambling is I mean, it might well just be my ADHD, but I've always rambled. I find it's kind of how I make sense of the world, is often by speaking to what wants to come out, sort of, and it's hard for me to be very, to articulate in a few words. I have to sort of ramble. And actually, for a long time, before I had my autism and ADHD diagnosis, quite late in my adult life, I was very conscious of the ramble, and it actually took me a huge amount of energy to control the rambling, to put a lid on it. And actually, since my diagnosis, I'm also, trying to understand more where that rambling's coming from. But actually, I also think there is something quite helpful, generative perhaps, in the practice of rambling. Could rambling be a kind of social technology for these times? Because in the world of kind of rational, logical, controlling thinking, what often that does is it gives us it's sort of, in some ways, it's quite constraining to those of us that can't out joust someone cerebrally through a few words, or say this in a couple of sentences, or here's an agenda which we must stick to, or we put these controlling kind of logics around words and voice communication in a lot of the spaces that we find ourselves in, and that in some ways keeps the flow quite kind of boxed, quite controlled. There's not much space for going off piste, wandering into the woods, into the darker parts, meandering, strolling, rambling. You see what I'm saying? See where I'm coming from? So I'm kind of interested in rambling as a possible, important social technology for these times we're in, because perhaps through the ramble we might learn a lot more about ourselves and each other by allowing this more freeform, flowing conversation to happen. And in fact, I was last year. I was in conversation with a really interesting human being who had roots in Kenya, and she was telling me that rambling is very much a practice there with her people, because by sitting together in community and allowing a ramble to just go on and on and on was often how knowledge and was co-created by the people. It was through these extended, free-flowing, meandering rambles that were not necessarily very, like rationally thought out, but much more spontaneous and emergent, that a deeper understanding began to emerge between people. A knowing that was much more textured and detailed and nuanced and dynamic and alive. Yeah, a knowledge that's more alive. And I think a ramble actually is a much more of is a very alive thing. I mean, even just to ramble on foot is to go where you are pulled, or beckoned, or whispered. I don't know if can you get whispered on a ramble? I don't know, but there's something about it's this kind of much more unrestricted flow. It's not like I'm going for a walk from A to B, which is obviously nice sometimes. Sometimes you haven't got much time. That's what you need to do. But the ramble is more freestyle. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's just about more freestyling is needed potentially right now. Well, we definitely got to go for the highway. That's for sure. The highway is just, it's destroying us. It's like, as Bio Akamalafe said to me a few years ago, we're caught in the ant death spiral. We're just going round and round and round and round and round and round, going, no, just keep going. And then sometimes, hoping that progress will just progress and things will get better. And then actually the ants just die. And that's, probably where we're going. So we need more freestyling, definitely more rambling. Anyway, so that's what this is about. Rambling in the woods, or rambling in the Ghostwoods. So yes, just so you know, that's what you're tuning into. It's kind of madness, really, but perhaps madness is really what we need right now. Let's speak. Let's allow the madness to come through us. Actually, yes. What might happen if we allowed it all to flow, rather than pushing it down, suppressing it, trying to make it make sense, making everything make sense before you say it. I think that's what I find so exhausting, trying to sort of make things make sense so that when you can say it, people know what you're saying, because I don't know what I'm saying, because I don't know what's going on half the time. It makes no sense to me anymore, most things. Sitting in the woods makes sense. Anyway, moving on.
You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast with my dad, Dan Burgess.
I used to visit some woods just up the road from me. I could just walk up into this ancient woodland near me. But I've come up now. I'm decided that for this year I'm going to build on Rambling in the Woods, and I'm going to call this one Rambling in the Ghostwoods, because I'm here up on the land at Ghostwood Down, which is land on the edges of the city of Bath where I live, and this is land where we are stewarding now, and on a journey to regenerate this land alongside regenerating human beings. So it's a place for intergenerational regeneration of land and humans, and it's where we've been offering some of our becoming crew nature-based experiences, the community solos, the overnight experiences, and various things. And it's land that we are slowly bringing back to life with bringing more trees back onto the land through natural regeneration and planting, and creating orchards and various other wonderful things. And it's a slow journey, but the real important piece is bringing people here and a place for people to heal along with the land. And it feels like, at least to me and those that I work with, that that's such a vital thing in these times. Spaces and places for processing and letting go and grieving and laughing and dreaming and imagining, and really just places to be, these kind of liminal, nourishing spaces on the edges of our constructed realities that allow us to become differently. And we're working here with really kind of, in some ways, very ancient practices that we've kind of remixed, I think, a little bit for these times. The practice of sitting in circle, in council, the practice of deep listening to the land, to ourselves, to each other, to our bodies, the practices of imagination, collective imagination, ecological imagination, rites of passage, where we can come and hold experiences that allow people to go through that cycle of severance, letting go, stepping away, shedding, ending parts of ourselves, and crossing thresholds into more mysterious encounters on the land, and then coming back, the return to the village to sit in community and be seen and witnessed and heard. And these are some of the things we're doing here, as alongside the land regeneration and bringing trees back and bringing the wildlife back and the waters back on the land and So I thought it might be quite fun to do these rambling in the Ghostwoods, and to record them in different spots on the land. So right now I'm sitting at the bottom of the land near the stream, and there's a spot. These are spots that we've created naturally in amongst various little little shelters on the landscape, and this is where people come and do their solos. And this spot I'm in today is down at the bottom, and it's called Willow Resting because it's right opposite this huge ancient willow that's kind of come right down. It actually looks like it's resting, and obviously lots of new willows are emerging around it. There's still a lot of life in it. And in fact, I've been actually, the last couple of weeks, I've been cutting young branches, small branches off the big willow, and then just literally sticking them into the wet ground around it. Willows love water, and hoping that they will root, because that's what willows do, and creating new willow trees. That's the plan. So that's where I am, and really this whole format, the format of the ramble, is exactly that. It's just a ramble. I'm going to try and speak from the heart. I'm going to try and speak spontaneously. I haven't really planned anything, and my aim is to release these alongside conversations with guests and other little sonic adventures that I'll also be trying to do a handful of this year, where I go into sort of themes in a more of a kind of storying, immersive way. So that's the plan for this year for the pod. Ramblings from Ghostwood Down, guest conversations, and a handful of sonic immersive stories. If I can fit that all in amongst, the collapse of civilization and everything else, I'll be doing well. But yeah, I'm feeling pretty exhausted, and it's only the start of March. I don't know how you've been getting on this year, but I've been struggling. I've got a lot of pain in I have these neck injury, degenerative disc in my neck, which flares up from time to time, which has been really playing up these last month, and so I'm feeling a lot of pain a lot of the time. It's weird. It sort of goes into my arms and traps nerves, and that's been, I think, been making me quite exhausted, along obviously with the huge just prolonged rain that we had at the start of the year. And obviously just this sort of surrealness of these times, this sort of mad violence, war machines, genocides, killing of children, land grabbing, that just is accelerating, and the kind of deluded, psychopathic, maniac men in positions of power that just seem to be completely detached from any sense of reality of life, any kind of morals, any kind of humility, and just it's like it feels deranged to me. It feels like it was in really deranged times. And I think what I find really tricky is it just feels like, I don't know, it feels like there's such a numbing that's happening to folks, a desensitization. And it's hard. It's like this stuff's happening, but it almost feels like, sometimes I feel like, who else is really feeling this? Because it feels like so much is being hidden or silenced. And even when I watch, when I look at the kind of media, and I just like, well, what, it's just like everyone's pretending. I mean, it's like a pretense that somehow we just keep going. And I think that's what I'm finding exhausting, which is so much more, liberating if we could just speak to the collapse and speak to the mess and speak to the not knowing, from a place of humility and, okay, so what should we do? What can we do here? Rather than just still the binary, extreme divisiveness of somehow, this delusion of control that these people over here know what to do, or no, we know what to do, and while our beautiful spaceship is just also just kind of in many ways coming apart, so much of the life support systems are in overwhelm, I think, as our bodies are and our souls are. There's a sort of overwhelm in the body that I think is so the mirroring the overwhelm of the land, and so it's exhausting, I find. I don't know how you find things. So that's why I like coming onto the land. I like going into the woods, and I like, this is what I call hedge media. You can't trust the mainstream media. I mean, it's just so corrupt and, infiltrated by corporate interest and political power, and it's just nonsense. I mean, it doesn't reflect what's going on. I think that's the thing. The last 2 or 3 years particularly, I think we're, many of us have seen, witnessing that it's a machine that's trying to keep hold of a story that is an illusion to what we know is happening, to what we can see, what we can feel, what we can sense. And it's just like a I don't know what it is. It's just not real, is it? And yet it's supposed to be real, but it's not real. But here, where I am right now, this is real, out here with the Willow at the bottom of the land with the stream. And I'm very curious at the moment about hedge media, going to the land and listening and observing and watching. What can we receive through the hedge media rather than the, TV and the internet and all these controlled media systems which are trying to hold certain perceptions, certain realities, certain stories. So I'm interested in tuning into the hedge media, into this much more complex, wider intelligence of beings, of trees, of creatures that have been here for way longer than the human. Ultimately that makes them elders, and ultimately there is wisdom in eldership, right? So I'm really interested in what can happen when we create that intentionality. Tuning into the real, true source of life, the Earth system. That's intelligence. That is the system that has evolved through billions of years of experimentation, and there's a lot of learning, a lot of wisdom in that system, rather than these constructed human systems which we've been trying to construct, which eventually all collapse, clearly, because they try and stay locked and rooted and controlling on a spaceship, a living planet, which is the opposite. It's constantly evolving, constantly moving into different relationship, constantly experimenting, adapting, in this, in this emergent, alive way. And that's not how we have been programmed to live. We've been programmed to live in a very kind of programmatic, controlling, certain way that is, that we try and scale all the time. All the systems, learning, education, health, business, it's all about creating this model and then just scaling it. And, nothing like that exists in the rest of the spaceship, in the living world. So, I think it would be really helpful if we started getting out into the woods and on the land a lot more, and getting off the nonsense media and these things which are happening, which I don't think we have any control over, unfortunately. These lunatics are just being lunatics. I was listening to, I can't remember what I was listening to, but someone was saying that the US is spending about $1 billion a day on weaponry in Iran. $1 billion a day. Imagine that. And there are people in America that are having to, take out massive debts and loans to get like insulin, right? To take insulin to keep them alive. There's no medical care. $1 billion a day on blowing shit up and blowing people up and blowing children up, and using vast amounts of materials and energy, vast amounts of material energy. I mean, there's us lot, right? Try not to use plastic straws and doing our recycling. And these bombs and missiles and drones are just, not only extracting vast, precious resources, but then causing absolute mayhem in terms of damage to the living world as well as damage to humans. It's insane. And yet when you watch it sometimes the way on the news, it's sort of portrayed as like, aren't we really clever that we've got all these clever weapons? I mean, it's like, it's sick. It's a sickness. We're in a very sick time in the human story. And what we're trying to do here, in our own tiny little way, is help grow a different type of human that is able to understand relationship and entanglement of life, and to cultivate that humility and compassion and imagination required to both care for all life, but also to know how to practice ways of being that allow us to be with the uncertainty with courage and compassion and humility, rather than violence and divisiveness, and are able to develop an imaginative capacity which is rooted in the source of life itself, and to build a kind of moral quality which we desperately need, and an ability to participate, to believe that we can become differently, that we can be different humans that centre love and care, and a sense of being part of something much bigger and more mysterious and extraordinary, which is this incredible thing called life.
We live on a life-giving rock called Earth, hurtling through space. How bonkers is that? You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast.
So yeah, that's the start of the year, and I was thinking about this conversation I'm hearing a lot, about fascism coming in the UK and spreading, fast pretty much everywhere. And actually last night I went to see a book launch with Eche Temelkran. Have I spelt that right? Said that right? Eche Temelkran. And her new book, Nation of Strangers. And she's amazing. It's her third book. And she's Turkish and left Turkey. Well, she was exiled. She left and didn't go back. With fascism rising there about 10 years ago. And this book, I haven't read it yet, I just got it last night, but she was talking about this idea of unhoming, unhomed. And it's not just people that have had to leave their country for war or fascism, to escape, whatever it is, so migrants and exiles and refugees, but also she was talking about this idea of unhoming, and unhomed is happening more and more to people around the world who are still in the places that they grew up in, but they don't feel like they belong anymore. That people are losing faith in themselves, in each other. They don't feel like the politics is for them anymore. They don't feel like, I guess, feeling homeless politically, feeling homeless spiritually, feeling homeless socially. She was talking about this idea of a stranger in your own land, and that's a feeling, and it's happening, and people are feeling this everywhere. And I think I feel that. I totally feel that, and this feeling of exhaustion because you just don't feel like you belong. And so she talks of that as this idea of, she believes this is this fascism that's baked into neoliberalism, and that is spreading now, and it's affecting our ability to sort of even have faith in ourselves and each other to be differently. It's almost like we give up and we just numb ourselves. And I feel like that. So she was talking about, this being deprived of a home, disruption of your day-to-day lives, and the stripping away of it all. So that was, and she's like, we've got to, this stuff is coming, it's happening. She's been talking about this for 10 years particularly to sort of Western culture, saying it's coming for you too, fascism. And she's like, this is happening, so we have to learn to. She was talking about kind of like a political healing, a sort of, again, a politics of care, I guess, of seeing each other and believing in each other and having faith in each other. On Saturday, I went to an evening in Bath called Cracks of Light, organised by this group, amazing group called Cracks of Light, and it was a night of basically to sort of honour a pilgrimage that's going on. It's called Pilgrimage for Palestine, which is a group of writers and activists who've been supporting a school in Gaza and in Cairo in Egypt to help young Palestinians with an education in the chaos that they're all suffering, particularly a creative education, and looked at sort of writing and poetry and performance. And they were doing this pilgrimage from Spain to London, and they'd gone to Bristol, and then they stopped in Bath for the night, and it was a night of poetry and music and stories by lots of Palestinians and then British artists and writers. And it was really, you could feel in the space like a kind of, I think maybe that's it felt like it was actually a group of people that were unhomed, but were finding joy and connection to be with each other. You could feel the exhaustion of another war beginning in Iran in the room. But some of the stories and the poetry from these young Palestinians and Gazans was just mind blowing, and it was a big kind of hit of love and courage and connection. So there's something about that. I think this connecting with the land, coming together as communities, finding our creativity. Those things feel vital, necessary, essential. I think it's through those practices, those gatherings, those new habits of being more in community with the land and with each other, and expressing our grief and sorrow and overwhelm and confusion in the most creative ways. I think that's where something beautiful will emerge. I think it's the only way, actually, something beautiful will emerge. People were talking, things are happening so fast, right? It was only like a couple of weeks ago that the new Green MP, Hannah, I forget her surname, the wonderful plumber from Manchester, won her seat in the by-election to, instead of like the Reform candidate that was looking like they were going to take the seat. And it was really incredible to watch. Again, I'm not going to go into loads of detail about it because it's been well covered, but what you saw, I think, there is how a lot of people came together to help her win that seat. And it was a real sign of this really participative politics driven from the grassroots in real places by real people who have a grounded experience of the place that they're trying to represent. And a lot of people got involved in so many different ways to support her campaign and then the election, and she won the seat. And I think what's interesting is people are sort of getting quite interested on the Green Front, but what I would say is, like, we need this kind of mobilising happening everywhere, on the ground, now really, because it's 2 years before the general election here. And it's only going to be through everyone somehow participating, getting involved, building bridges between people that aren't talking to each other, starting this process of having faith in each other, seeing each other. That's what's going to make the change possible. If we think, we're just going to vote for Green, that's not the answer. What is required is a party politics that is fully entangling with places and communities and the grassroots energy, and forming this new kind of political movement which is totally powered by people and places. And it was interesting seeing how the reform candidate had been sort of dropped in from, I don't know where he lives, but he wasn't from that area. And it reminded me again of like this shift of what we need is the power of places and communities and people, you know, who are really grounded in the realities rather than, you know, career politicians who just sort of fly in, not really representing, not really understanding. I mean, how can you really represent a place if you don't actually live there? You've never spent proper time there. You don't understand the nuance and the relationships and the web of connectivity of a place, the hum of a place, the rhythm of a place, the vibe. And I hear folks saying, oh, well, you know, if we don't, you know, Nigel Farage is going to get in. And he will get in. And it is going to require all of us, particularly those of us, I think, who've got a bit more privilege, who've got the ability, a bit more time to go out and do this stuff. It needs everyone reinventing these systems together, creating something new, because the current one is taking us to the brink. And it reminded me again of that same week there was this Channel 4 drama doc, Dirty Business, all about the river pollution and the sewage scandals and the privatisation of the water companies. It's been going on for, you know, since the 80s really, under Thatcher. And we now have the most, you know, heavily polluted rivers, full of shit. And actually in the series they featured Chris Hines, who was one of the co-founders of Surfs Against Sewage, who came on the podcast about 7 years ago, which I actually released the episode a couple of weeks back. I re-released it because it's brilliant. But what Chris reminded me of was the power of community and places. You know, the reason they set the charity up was because they were surfing in sewage, literally coming out covered in raw sewage. And this was happening all the time. And again, it comes back to this reality of being the lived experiences of people. I've always felt this with people that, you know, work or play, you know, out in the living world, in the rivers and the ocean and the woods and the forests and the mountains. You know, we see the reality of the impacts of the modernity machine, of extractive capitalism, of infinite growth. We see the impacts on our spaceship, on this living, intelligent Earth, and are often, you know, the eyes and the ears that can ring the alarm bells early. And I think it's the same for the politicians that are emerging out of these real places. You know, we understand them. We see the realities. So I think this idea of, you know, rooting back into place and standing up for these places because we understand them more, because we're in them. What would that look like to really, you know, give that more responsibility to places again? And then the power of places and communities to go, well, this is, you know, we see this. This is the reality, and we're not going to be fobbed off and fooled that there is no issue here. So yeah, that's very much a Becoming Crew vibe, right? Stepping into service, in service to life on board this spaceship Earth, becoming active participants in the changes we want to see. That's the only way through. And learning to be comfortable with not knowing, because none of us know. But if we keep believing that because we don't know we can't do anything, we're buggered. So we have to step into that. We have to learn to be okay with the uncertainty. And there's a lot of beauty and extraordinary things that will come from that. But this is ongoing evolutionary becoming. This is practice driven. This is experimental. This is learning together and unlearning together. So that's quite a ramble, wasn't it? So, what I would say is if you do appreciate this podcast, we could really do with some more backers of it. It's year 8, and it takes a lot to make this podcast happen. Money, time, energy. We have 30 people who pay a monthly subscription on our Substack. Wonderful, beautiful people. But considering the podcast gets thousands of listens, it's not a lot. So I have also started a Patreon, the Spaceship Earth Patreon. And if you don't want to subscribe monthly, you could just donate something on the back of an episode that you particularly liked, or, give one-off payments or whatever it is. But if you appreciate this podcast and you want more of it, and the continuation of the guests and the sonic immersions, then we would really appreciate some more donations to keep this thing going. So I think I'm going to stop the ramble there, because I'm quite tired and it's getting late. It's about to get dark, actually, and I need to go home. But I thought I might read a poem just to finish off, from my dear friend and fellow Becoming Crew guide, Mark DeLissa, in his poetry book, Ashes to the Breeze. Let's say... Here we go. I've just opened it onto a page, and it's called Open Heart. It's in the questions that the answers can be found. Before a flower can reach for the light, first the seed must be buried in the ground. It's in the darkness and the cold that we unfold and manifest. No amount of growth can come without some measure of stress. Only you can illuminate the dark place in your heart. Only you can illuminate the dark places in your heart. The hardest part of any journey is always the start. The same atoms that created you were born in dying stars. In time, all wounds will heal. We no longer need to be defined by our scars. Cast aside judgment, cast aside shame. Open your heart. You no longer need to defend it against pain. So, it's farewell from Willow resting here on Ghostwood Down. Next month I shall. I don't know which direction I should go in. Maybe I'll just do it randomly where it feels right. I came down here. I had actually when I was coming up to the land there, I thought I'm going to do the first one in Hazel Hiding up the top. But I had to come down here because I really had this urge to try and plant these willow branches, and that took me down to the willow, and then the spot is here, Willow resting, so that's why I came here. So anyway, farewell from Willow resting, from the willow and all the beings down here. The woodland willow stands, a lovely bush of nebulous silver. There the spring goddess revealed. Thanks for having us. It's been lovely. And goodbye from Ghostwood Down. Peace and out. Look after yourselves out there. Just keep hugging each other and trees and stuff. Love is the way. Always. Love is the way.
If you've appreciated listening to this podcast, would you consider sharing it with a friend? or leaving us a rating or review via your podcast provider. It helps more people to find us and we'd be most grateful.